Dramatic news breaking this morning. President Trump's former national security advisor, Michael T. Flynn, pleaded guilty on Friday to lying to the FBI about conversations with the Russian ambassador last December, becoming the first senior White House official to pledge cooperation in the special counsel's wide-ranging inquiry of election meddling. News has been breaking from that all day since then, but although we knew this was going to happen, Flynn has gone down. And so, Cenk?
Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, damn straight. Okay, down goes Flynn. Down goes Flynn. Down goes Flynn. So they got him on a shout charge, a little charge. Okay, there's a lot more they could have gotten him on, but that's the whole point of a plea deal.
Yes.
I give you a little charge, you give me a lot of information. Of course, the big question is, what's a lot of information?
Yeah.
And Flynn could have the mother load. So, John, more details.
Yeah, so we're gonna break into a little bit later on our speculation about what could come out of this, who else might be dragged into this section based on what we think Flynn might know. But first, let's break down what Flynn actually admitted to doing. So court documents say that on December 29th of last year, Mr. Flynn called a senior transition official who was with other members of the team at Mr. Trump's Mar-a-Lago club in Florida, quote, to discuss what, if anything, to communicate to the Russian ambassador about the US sanctions. Of course, importantly, this is before Donald Trump was president. This is during the transition period. The next day after that conversation, Russian President Vladimir Putin announced that his government would not immediately retaliate against the United States, despite his condemnation of the sanctions. So they talked to themselves, what should we say to the Russians about these sanctions? The next day, Vladimir Putin makes a big change. He doesn't retaliate, but so far it's just Flynn, and maybe he talked to someone. I don't think anyone else was involved. But then you could look at this tweet. Great move on delay by Vladimir Putin. I always knew he was very smart coming out the day after Flynn's conversation on the phone. It seems like he was paying attention to this issue. I have a feeling they probably looped him in, but I will leave that to Robert Mueller. Now, we've got some other stuff that we have to discuss involving Kushner and Israeli settlements. But first off with this, one of the reasons this is important is that although nobody cares about this law, that sort of behavior is technically a federal crime. It goes against the Logan Act. The Logan Act is a United States federal law intended to prevent the undermining of the government's position. It makes it a felony for unauthorized citizens who negotiate with foreign governments having a dispute with the United States, which is obviously what that's intended to do. It's talking to Russia about the Obama administration's changes to the policy and then trying to change Russia's retaliation against that policy. Now, no one has ever actually gone to jail for breaking the Logan Act. It's a very old law. It's still technically a felony. I just think it's amazing that some laws just like, it's old, who cares? You can just do whatever you want.
So let's lay out further details about what he could have been convicted on and what he has pled guilty on. So he pled guilty on lying to the FBI. But since John is right that most people don't pursue the Logan Act, if he had just told the FBI, yeah, I talked to the Russian ambassador, and yes, technically we're not in office yet, we're gonna be in office in about a month, but I wanted to start negotiations on both the sanctions front, but also the Israeli settlements. Fairly inconceivable that would have created any kind of controversy, that the FBI would have been like, oh no, that's a big deal. I mean, Netanyahu called Trump and wanted to make sure that they didn't suffer any international consequences for continuing to occupy the Palestinians. That's American foreign policy 101. No way anybody was gonna get into trouble for that. So, but he lied to the FBI anyway, which is what triggered not only the charges, but then the question of why? Why are you bothering to cover this up? And it turns out he covered a lot of stuff up, and there's good reason for that.
Before we jump into more analysis, I do want to show you just one or two videos. Just there's been a lot. It's been a rough year. Okay, so this hopefully make you feel a little bit better. If we can go, here is Flynn leaving the courthouse after what happened this morning.
Lock him up! Lock him up!
Now, just in case you're coming to the story a little bit later and you think that that's just an unruly mob, it's actually a reference to something involving Flynn. Here he is speaking at the RNC this last go around.
reckless president who believes she is above the law. Lock her up. That's right. That's right. Lock her up. I'm going to tell you what. It's unbelievable. You guys are good. Damn right. You're exactly right. There's nothing wrong with that. You know why we're saying that? We're saying that because if I, a guy who knows this business, if I did a tenth of what she did, I would be in jail today.
Well, can do, did do. So he's not yet in jail. And by the way, even on this relatively light charge, given what he could have gotten, and that's again the point of the plea deal, he could still get up to 5 years in prison. Yeah. So that lock him up indeed. And he didn't do 1/10 of what Hillary Clinton did. He did far worse.
Right, and also, you can understand why he would take a plea deal because based on the charges he was previously facing, he was looking to serve up to 60 years in prison. Yeah. But who knows whether or not he would get that full sentence, but that is a serious sentence that I think he wanted to avoid. And one thing I wanted to just quickly add, I think what you see throughout this whole Russia investigation, whether it's involving Flynn or other individuals who are part of Trump's campaign, or I should say administration, or Trump himself, is this unwillingness to be forthcoming. And why? Why? If you didn't do anything wrong, why don't you just tell the truth throughout this entire process? They just keep, lying and hiding things.
So now there's two possible reasons for Flynn's cover-ups and lies. One is personal and the other one is about the campaign and the administration. So he's got his own mess when it comes to not just the Russian government, but the Turkish government. So not only did he take about $530,000 from the Turkish government and did not reveal it, which is another violation of the law, it was done through a shell company that was Dutch. So he pretended it was Dutch, but he knew in fact it was the Turkish government giving him the money. So that's a more serious violation. But worse yet, he was in a meeting with Turkish officials where they talked about kidnapping someone inside the United States for $15 million. And now it gets worse. His son was also involved in that. So not only did he face up to 60 years for all the different charges, but his son faced some serious jail time as well. And that knucklehead, Mike Flynn Jr., is one of the dumbest guys in America. So unsurprising that that clown got his dad, who was also a clown, into big trouble, and Trump as well. So if they had just gotten convicted on the Turkish government stuff and the Russian government stuff that he didn't admit to, he had gotten money, for example, from RT to go visit Putin, $45,000, and he had gotten money from Russian business interests on that same trip for about $22,000. Okay, you think, well, he actually could do that. Jill Stein was at that same dinner. I don't know if she got paid, but it's not that big a deal. You just reveal it, right? But again, he lied about it, and he pretended it was US companies that paid him on the trip. Why? Because that leads to, is there something else going on with Flynn and Trump in regards to Russia? Yeah. And I think that that's the mother lode. That's the really interesting part here. And Robert Mueller, who is an excellent prosecutor, is not going to give him a plea deal when he was facing all of those serious charges because he gave him mediocre information. Flynn obviously gave him really good information about people higher up in the chain, and particularly one guy higher up in the chain named Trump.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up the son. People have been speculating for what feels like months now that might be the thing that gets him to finally flip and assist the special counsel's investigation. Here is Flynn's statement that came out today, which maybe gets into that just a little bit. In a statement, Flynn said he acknowledged that his actions were wrong, and through my faith in God, I am working to set things right. I don't know if God was in favor of the $15 million for the kidnapping. I don't know where God stands on that. My guilty plea and agreement to cooperate with the special counsel's office reflect a decision I made in the best interests of my family and of my country. I accept full responsibility for my actions. Full responsibility for the ones that I am now going to be charged with, not with the others, because I'm doing the deal. Yeah. There's no responsibility for the other one.
And for the best interest of my family.
Yes.
And now you want to hear something amazing? A kind of a hero in a roundabout way of this story is a neocon. What? Okay, it's a guy I totally,
I know what you're gonna say.
utterly disagree with. He's helped to start the Iraq War. I couldn't disagree with him more. But James Woolsey, former CIA director, was in the meeting where the Turkish officials are like, "Hey, you want 15 million bucks for the kidnapping?" And Woolsey's like, "I'll see you guys later." He gets out and leaves, and then he's like, "What are you guys doing?" No, and he told the government that the Flynn boys were interested in that deal, and that's part of what got them in so much trouble.
So there's a couple of other aspects about this that we're going to discuss, but I want to drill down on one thing, because right now we've got these conversations that he lied about to the FBI. That's why he's flipped now. But this really takes the entire thing full circle, starting with the Comey incidents, his firing, why Robert Mueller is brought on. All of that did originally start with Flynn. So I want to go through a couple of steps that really, I think, make that very clear. Now understand that the White House is saying that nothing about the guilty plea or the charge implicates anyone other than Mr. Flynn, which they're allowed to say for now, I guess. But let's talk about some times. So the charging document shows Flynn lied to the FBI agents January 24th about 2 specific conversations with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak a month before. 2 days after Flynn lied to the FBI, Acting Attorney General Sally Yates warned White House counsel Don McGahn those false statements made the National Security Advisor vulnerable to blackmail by Russia. Now understand, importantly, they didn't care originally about that. They thought that, yeah, so what? We can all be flipped. But anyway, going on. The following day after he lied, then January 27th, George Papadopoulos also lied to the FBI about his own repeated contacts with Russian agents. President Donald Trump summoned immediately after that, then FBI Director James Comey to the White House later that evening for a private dinner where the president asked for his loyalty, the conversation that originally caused him to no longer feel that Comey would be loyal to him. On January 28th, Trump and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin spoke by phone, and it's believed that Flynn was also involved in that call. So look, inside of just the span of 1 week, you have Flynn and Papadopoulos lying about their contacts with the Russians. You have totally unconnected, because Trump didn't know about any of this. Immediately after they both lied to the FBI, Trump has a dinner with the FBI director where he says he's going to need him to pledge his loyalty. And then immediately after that talks to Vladimir Putin over the phone. That is a weird week early on. It's the first week of the presidency.
So way too many cover-ups if this was just about, in the transition we talked to the ambassador of Russia. No, that's not what this is about. There's way too many cover-ups for that. Again, Mueller wouldn't offer a plea deal on something so small anyway if that was just what they were worried about. But secondly, that Comey conversation is so important, and Flynn flipping is so important, because if it turns out that Trump asked Comey to take it easy on Flynn because, hey, he's a good guy, he's my friend, like we grew up together and ate bagels for lunch at the cafeteria, I don't know, whatever, right? Some absurd reason having nothing to do with Trump's cover-up, well, then it's harder to make an obstruction of justice case. But if Flynn tells the authorities, no, Trump was trying to get me off because we were colluding with the Russians together, obstruction of justice, and Trump is screwed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
that's. I mean, I don't know how likely it is that it'll play out that way, but I think you make a really good point about Bob Mueller being a great prosecutor and how he's not going to give him a plea deal that's significant for a lack of really good information, incriminating information. And also remember, Trump just flat out ignored the warnings from Yates, which John mentioned, and then Trump on several different occasions tried to get individuals investigating this case to just drop it, whether it were members of Congress that are, doing an investigation, or firing Comey. That's another example. Like, there's all sorts of weird, shady stuff going on, and you pile that onto the fact that they're not being forthcoming about their contacts with Russian officials.
Yeah, so as you were just implying, earlier this summer, this was broken, I believe, yesterday by the New York Times. Trump phoned senior Republicans in Congress to get them to stop the investigations, including speaking directly with Richard Burr, the leader of the Senate Intelligence Committee probe. Now, Burr and others say, he just doesn't know what's appropriate or inappropriate, but this continues a months-long campaign of trying to stop these investigations. Which, if all it was that they misremembered some benign, innocent phone calls, seems like a sort of bizarre level of interest that he's taking. I mean, even pulling Comey aside and talking to him, just because he thought that Flynn had misspoken about some conversations, does anyone actually believe that that's what was driving Trump, not just to fire the head of the FBI to protect his friend, but then, and I realize so much has happened, it's easy to forget this stuff. Immediately after, like a few weeks or a month after he'd been fired, he was talking with his aides about rehiring him. He apparently made a phone call to Flynn, even though Bannon had told him not to, telling him to stay strong. And in March of this year, there was the leak from Flynn's team saying that he was looking into potentially doing some sort of deal with the investigation. And at that point, they said that he had a story to tell, with the idea being that if you're doing this so early, when barely any of the investigatory work had been done, you're worried not just that you could go down, but that other people have a story too. And if you're not the first to get to the investigators, you suddenly might not be as valuable. And that's why he made the insane move, which is not normally done, of making it public that he was looking to make a deal.
And finally, and again, understand there's two layers of problems for Trump. One is the actual collusion with the Russians, if Flynn knows about that and then has information. The second is the obstruction of justice, where he's trying to stop this investigation. And Anna and John were just referring to that. And there's this quote from Donald Trump on Twitter, where he said, "Mike Flynn should ask for immunity in that it is a witch hunt excuse for big election loss by media and Dems of historic proportion." Well, there you are, committing obstruction of justice in plain sight, saying to a guy under investigation, ask for immunity, okay? And especially when you're the guy who could one day, for example, give a pardon to that same guy. It's basically saying, look, I tried to get the FBI director to drop the investigation, he wouldn't do it. Now you're under further investigation, so I'm now telling you publicly to ask for immunity because I don't want you to get in trouble and I got your back. So and now that Flynn has flipped and is willing to give information on whatever they did internally, the fact that Trump was trying to cover that up seems apparent and obvious. So on the obstruction, even if the collusion charge we don't know much about yet because we don't know what Flynn has told Mueller, the obstruction charge is right in front of all of us. He did it publicly. The only question was Flynn gonna flip? And now that he has, they're almost certainly gonna get him on obstruction. If you like this video, bless your heart. We got a lot more where that came from. We do a full show every day, Monday through Friday. Come enjoy it ad-free by becoming a member, tytnetwork.com/join.